According to a report published by Public Health England 2018, an estimated 21% of alcohol-dependent parents and 52% of opioid-dependent parents were in treatment between 2016 and 2017.
Problematic drug or alcohol abuse was a present factor in around 47% of all serious case reviews in 2016 and 2017. Serious case reviews are local inquiries into the death or serious injury to a child where neglect or abuse is known or suspected, including where drugs were ingested by the child. The Association of Directors of Children's Services completed an analysis which found that double the quantity of early help assessments were for trigger trio reasons in 2017 to 18 than 2 years previous. They are substance misuse, domestic violence and mental health. Looking at these figures, it is clear that this is an area in need of more research. We have assessed the current literature and found several key themes which we will explore in more depth.
Neurodevelopmental disorders are impairments of the growth and development of the brain or central nervous system. A narrow use of this term refers to a disorder of brain function that affects emotions, learning abilities, self-control and memory, which unfolds as the individual develops and grows. There are many types of disorders such as ADHD, autism, learning disabilities such as dyslexia and speech problems. There are many different factors that can be influenced by neurodevelopmental disorders. I have decided to focus on language development. Many studies have looked into the increased risk of delayed language development due to cocaine and opioid addiction within parents during pregnancy or exposure throughout early years, and then compared these to mothers with no substance abuse problems. Studies have tested expressive language skills at the age of 2 and have an age range over 20 years. It was found that inner city children are at more risk to neurodevelopmental disorders, suggesting that environment can play a part. Both children who were exposed to drug abuse and non-drug abuse that were tested at the age of 3 and 5 both scored poorly and worsened over time on developmental tasks. As well as this, in other neuropsychological tests, no change in cognitive function was found. There was also no clear or significant difference in language skills in some studies, but then other studies found that within expressive language development, that children with mothers that suffer from substance abuse scored lower than children with compassionate mothers, suggesting that findings are still very mixed. It's also been found that cocaine can influence a baby's development while it's still a fetus. This is due to cocaine hydrochloride molecules from the cocaine crossing into the placenta. This can then decrease the reuptake of neurotransmitters. This causes a flood of neurons. Due to this, the increase of neurotransmitters disrupts the development of the neurosystem in the fetus. To find out how this happens, more research is still being done. Most researchers have taken precautions to get the most accurate results possible. It was found that some did this by taking into account parental influences, such as things like most substance abuse mothers are normally younger, as well as them having a lower education themselves. This could have an influence on the child due to them not being able to get the proper support in educational activities and language development of the parents that they need. It was also found that researchers excluded participants with alcohol-fatigue syndrome, as well as them using the same procedure for drug-exposed children as that to non-drug exposed children. In one study testing the impact of drug exposure on fetuses, both the parent and fetus were detoxed during pregnancy, which could have caused false results but had to be done for safety reasons. They also took out any mothers that didn't have substance abuse problems during 2 trimesters to try and get the best results possible. All studies within this topic were done as longitudinal studies to try and gain more knowledge and a better understanding of the effects of drug exposure during early years and throughout pregnancy. Most studies had a small participant sample due to using a vulnerable sample. This could have reduced the possibility of controlling the results. The study on neurodevelopment with the largest participant sample was the one that found an effect from drug exposure, but these studies also discussed environmental and parental effects as well as discarding opioid usage. Judging on all of this information, there is no clear evidence that drug abuse can influence a child's neurodevelopment or cause neurodevelopmental disorders. To gain a better understanding, more research needs to be done to find out the difference between parental, environmental, and drug use effects on development. Overall, making this presentation went well due to us working well as a team and being able to set tasks. One thing that could have went better is if we had spent less time talking and been more prepared before meetings.
Environmental psychology can be described as an interdisciplinary field that focuses on the relationship between individuals and their surroundings. This defines the term environment broadly, such as encompassing natural environments, social settings, built environments, learning environments, and informational environments. However, social learning theory proposes that children's strategies for managing their emotions, resolving disputes, and engaging with others are learned from experiences and are carried forward across setting and time. The primary source of these experiences are based on younger children within parent-child and family relationship environment. The aims of the presentation is to discuss and critique a journal article relating to environmental factors within developmental psychology, which investigates parents that have a drug addiction and how this affects children. The journal article is an overall review on what is to be looking into the potential service needs of children whose parents are substance abusers. The main emphasis was the risk outcomes that these children are faced with by the parenting deficits that are widely presented within these families. Instead of looking at the etiological role of parental substance abuse in children's negative outcomes, the review discusses the complex interrelated risk factors that often co-occur with the exacerbate risk that is associated with parental drug use. The primary review of the study looks at the higher risk that children whose parents are drug abusers have a poor academic functioning, emotional, behavioural and social problems, and an earlier onset of substance use, fast acceleration in substance use patterns, and higher rates of drug use disorders. The study shows circumstantial risk factors for children with parents who are substance users show signs of being less warm, responsiveness, and being less physical and lack of verbal engagement, as well as harsher and more over-involved interaction styles, causing a greater risk for child maltreatment and less secure attachment patterns. Other aspects of parents who are substance users are more likely to play a role in children's adjustment, such as the type of drug abused and the timing of the parent's substance abuse in the child's life, should be further assessed in future research. Despite the large literature on children of substance abusing parents, few studies have focused on the extent to which deficits in parenting mediate the effects of parents' substance abuse on a child's outcome. Therefore, future studies should continue to investigate the role of parenting and the family context as explanatory reasons for children's negative outcomes. Greater empirical attention should also be paid to genetically informed samples that can differentiate environmentally mediated risk mechanisms from shared genetic factors in substance abusing parents and their children. It is important to know that not all these children or families show such adjustment problems. In some cases, children of substance abusing parents do not differ from their peers. Factors that appear to influence this level of risk include a number of impaired parents, the regency of substance abuse and recovery status of the parent, co-occurring parental psychopathology, and the presence of other caretakers. In conclusion, as previously mentioned, this study showed contextual risk factors for children who have parents who are substance users and how they may cause them to be less warm, responsive and physical and have less verbal engagement, as well as harsher and more over-involved interaction styles, causing a greater risk for child maltreatment and less secure attachment patterns. Therefore, with a discussion of future directions for research and guidelines for professionals working with children and their families where parental substance abuse is present. Greater empirical attention should also be paid to genetically informed samples that can differentiate environmentally mediated risk mechanisms from shared genetic factors in substance abusing parents and their children. Upon reflection of doing this presentation, I struggled to meet small targets due to family commitments and work commitments outside of the university. My problems with prioritising work schedule are also a reflection of time management within this group work, as I often prioritise my child's commitments. For example, my son attends karate lessons on a Monday evening. His homework from school takes precedence over my own work. If my daughter is ill and cannot go to nursery, therefore struggle for childcare, I should be delegating or sharing the workload with my husband. I have learnt that I need to trust my peers more and to share the workload so that I can prioritise my own work and not feel guilty. Furthermore, I have learnt to prioritise what needs to be done first and develop the work-life balance, as this will be important and good practice to get into when I am in full-time working environment, as this will help to develop my time management skills and delegation skills.
This part of the presentation consists of a review of attachment theory and its view towards developmental psychology of children who have been prenatally exposed to illicit drugs or drug-abusing mothers. By the end of the section, you should be able to recognise a few key names in developmental psychology and its foundations. You will go also to gather a picture of attachment theory and how this links to prenatal drug exposure with reference to the development of a child both emotionally and behaviourally. This will include effects on the mother's cognitive abilities and parenting styles. The research shows how John Bowlby theorised how the maternal bond with the child was the main and most important relationship that a child can have. From this idea, attachment theory considers how the maternal bond was biologically reinforced through positive interaction, hugging and feeding being examples. It was considered on four main characteristics of proximity maintenance, safe haven, secure base and separation anxiety. It shows in the research how the mother-infant bond was paramount in the first 2 years of life. This will begin to build the social blocks of future life as well as emotional stability. The literature review shows how prenatal exposure can negatively impact both mother and child in respect of their cognitive abilities. Experiments such as the Strange Situation was developed in an attempt to observe the behaviour of children when a caregiver leaves them, when they are alone, and lastly when the caregiver returns. It was found in other research that children with less responsive mothers appear to be emotionally withdrawn. The paper expands further to say when children feel safe, secure and loved, they can thrive under the environment. Many of the drug users in much of the research were in fact single. This then questions the efficiency of parenting, making the role twice as hard or half as good. With minimal parenting, the four characteristics listed earlier become under stress and strain. The literature review displays how the drugs used adversely affected both cognitive and emotional functions. The implications of these effects seem mostly in ages 2 to 3. At this point, the bonds are forming and the child has become conceptualized with reality. The mother, less cognitively prepared for motherhood alone, typically without a partner, struggles to give guidance and provide a safe learning environment. Attachment theory would say that the four characteristics under strain, possibly inflicting emotional pain upon the child, such as fear, anger, sadness, or despair. Stevenson explains further, exhibiting how the first maternal bond could set a precedent for future relationships. This can mean the school, streets, or work, impacting on peer relationships, employability, motor skills development, or delinquency due to an unemployability or lack of social regulation. Saucy gives evidence of parenting styles and how the neglectful or permissive parents typically produce neglectful developmental outcomes. This includes avoidant or resistant children who become withdrawn from the mother. They explore very little and tend to cut themselves off from people. Further research shows how these parenting styles impact on college-level education. A full example of minimal parenting is viewed in Sussex 2017 from parenting from these drug-using mothers lacking negative reinforcement and/or positive stimulation hinders the effects of their parenting style. The child grows possibly at a slower speed or a different direction due to others because of the behaviour and interactions first experienced with the primary caregiver at such a young age. Critiques of the literature show that in the Fisher study, good points were that there was a big sample of over 1,000 people. It also used a longitudinal study which was primed for developmental research. The negative points in it were that not all drugs were adjusted for, as well as self-reports making data possibly false or skewed. Another area this paper could improve on would be the dose of drugs these women consumed during pregnancy could have been calculated better or at all, rather than just the self-reports. In a Silver study in 2013, the small sample of 24 women gathered much data because of the qualitative element. It did, however, fail to provide a definite reason for the mother's emotional problems. Failure to screen for such trauma or abuse in earlier life can affect results, especially if the caregiver's irrational behaviour is not due to drug use alone. Sussex-Vasek study. The paper was excellent in showing the negative developmental properties associated with ineffective parenting styles and cognitive implications imposed on the child. The study, however, only viewed 2 to 3 parenting styles at a time. This means that the styles could be closely related or not examined specifically enough. By using a cross-sectional design in collecting data, it was only once and hard to generalize to a wider sample. It also fails to show how an impaired executive function may be strictly down to parenting style alone. Emotional attachment, genetics, and socio-economic factors are also important. In all of the papers, none of them were able to measure or calculate how much drugs the women consumed during pregnancy. This questions the fairness of experiment validity, especially with cognitive results. Many of the women were single, matching them to couples could have also been a mismatch. However, this happens a lot due to circumstances. Polydrug use, however, limits the experimenter's ability to narrow the cause to such developmental impairments. Different drugs producing different physiological responses. The future research suggestions for this topic are that you could look into the effects of one parent against two and the developmental outcomes, the dose of drugs measured in prenatal experiments, such as the consumption of illicit drugs, and grouping them into specific groups. The structure of parenting is also a future topic. The consistency of parents hypothetically impacting development. A last point of future research could look to the social relationships beyond the home, such as the teacher, peers, or outside carers involved in the upbringing. The reflection for this piece of work was quite challenging. In the beginning, finding the relevant research was not too difficult given the topic choice. To then synthesize the evidence was challenging, some studies giving mixed reviews of the evidence, and others collecting evidence at much different ages. This made interpretation of the evidence quite hard, with different studies providing different data and results. The presentation was quite simple enough to put together, however, condensing the information to the time frame became very stressful eventually. Progress from the assessment came from my group who supported each other and gave feedback during all stages of the process. Weekly meetings along with class together helped us come together to make the presentation.
CDC Kaiser Permanent Adverse Childhood Experiences. This study is one of the largest investigations of childhood abuse, neglect, household challenges, and later life health and well-being. ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences, are classified as a traumatic event or experience early in life, which can have lasting effects on healthy development. The theory is the greater number of ACEs, the greater number of emotional or behavioural problems. The study was developed by the Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, 1998. There are 3 categories for ACEs. They are abuse, which can be emotional, physical, and sexual. Household challenges, such as violence towards the mother, substance abuse in the home, mental illness, parental separation, or incarceration of a house member. And lastly, neglect. This can be emotional or physical. The current research. The original study had a large sample of 17,337 participants, the largest sample to date using this model. The original model worked from the ACE pyramid, and each section linked into the other. Historical trauma, generational abuse for example, social conditions, poor socio-economic background, can lead to a higher chance of an ACE occurring. This can disrupt the neurodevelopment and have an impact on social, emotional and cognitive function. Individuals adopt behaviour that poses a risk to their health. This can lead to disease, disability and social problems, and the predicted outcome was early death. The study was the first of its kind to analyse multiple types of abuse experienced early in life as a whole, recognising that they are all linked. The two most popular methods for assessing lasting effects of an ACE are longitudinal qualitative studies involving sensitive analysis, and other studies involve questionnaires, surveys focusing on numbers and statistics. The current research findings emphasise the importance of investigating the long-term adjustment of children growing up with parents with a substance use disorder. One area of particular interest in regards to ACEs is the risk of relational problems and insecure attachments. This can lead to aggressiveness, hostility towards others, or copying learnt behaviour, i.e. using substances themselves. A key point is how childhood experiences may be related to the experience of becoming a parent and what complications may arise. In one study, sex offenders in a sample of 679, half had 4 or more ACEs. There is evidence to suggest that the longer an ACE lasts, the more harmful to development it will be. Keeping with that point, the risk of generational behaviour patterns are of high risk. This means that growing up in a substance misuse environment, that individual may go on to mimic that lifestyle, thus having own offspring, and the cycle begins again. Evaluation. The relationship between family-based adverse childhood experiences and substance use behaviours among a diverse sample of college students. Currently, over 25 million people in the United States report using illicit drugs, and over 65 million acknowledge recent misuse of alcohol. This study had a well-rounded rationale, which considered whether there was a difference across ethnicities, the extent of ACEs experienced among a student population, and whether there was a high number of students exposed to familial substance misuse. And it also aimed to inform intervention and screening tools for individuals entering education. A limitation of the study was that the age range was limited to 18 to 26-year-olds. The study focused on emerging adults, and whilst they did integrate a diverse ethnicity sample, they did not consider mature students. Therein lies the gap. It could be beneficial to study an older sample of drug users to examine the number of ACEs they experienced as children. In conclusion, the ACE study has been influential in understanding the impact of substance misuse exposure in early childhood. There is scope for much more detailed research using this model, and the model links several key factors which influence development. Overall, we worked well as a team. There was a good network of communication, and we all had an equal workload. We were able to give each other constructive criticism on our individual themes. What I believe I contributed was leadership and distribution of tasks. In more detail, finding themes. Once our group was formed and we chose our topic, we were tasked with finding themes within the current literature. I found the tool provided on Blackboard helpful and amended it to suit my needs. I printed the tool and used it to synthesize several papers, helping me find themes with ease. Deciding which theme to present. We found several themes, and in doing so we had to decide who was presenting what. The team seemed indecisive, hence I took the reins and assigned us all a theme to focus upon. I believe my fellow teammates were grateful of this and welcomed the leadership. Planning the timeline. Each week we met as a team, and at the end of our session we would set goals for the next week and ensure we were all in agreement. This ensured we would meet our deadline and enabled us to work effectively.